Entire cities, the economic powerhouses of their age, have vanished beneath the waves. Their disappearance did not just erase landmarks, it rewrote the very map of global commerce, redirecting the flow of wealth and ideas for centuries. You are about to uncover the stories of 30 lost maritime metropolises, and by the end, you will understand the fragile, invisible threads that connect our modern world to these sunken hubs. We will explore why a single Egyptian port's collapse could starve an empire, and how a city of pirates sank in a matter of minutes. What does the fate of these forgotten giants tell us about our own civilization's future? These cities were the lifeblood of continents, their harbors constantly buzzing with ships from distant, unimaginable shores. A single dock could host vessels from Rome, India, and Arabia, their holds filled with pepper, ivory, glassware, and gems. This was not merely trade, it was the first real globalization, a network of ports that functioned like neurons firing across the ancient world. The wealth generated here was astronomical, funding the pyramids of Egypt, the libraries of Alexandria, and the armies of empires. A successful port could bankroll an entire civilization's golden age, making its sudden loss not just a local tragedy but a global economic shock. This immense concentration of wealth and knowledge, however, made these hubs profoundly vulnerable. Their fortunes were tied to the sea, a partner as generous as it was merciless. A single shift in trade winds, a silted upriver, or one catastrophic storm could sever those vital connections forever. The story of Thonis-Heracleion, our first vanished city, is a perfect and dramatic example of this fragility. A place of legendary power, it simply dropped off the map, swallowed by the Mediterranean in a single, violent event. The grand port of Thonis-Heracleion did not simply fade away. It vanished as if the earth itself opened up and drank the city whole. For over 1,000 years, its very existence was considered little more than a myth, a name mentioned in ancient texts with no physical proof. Then, underwater archaeologists made a discovery that rewrote history. They found it resting on the seafloor at the mouth of the Nile, a city frozen in time. This was not a small trading post. Thonis-Heracleion was the mandatory gateway for all Greek ships entering Egypt, a bustling emporium where the wealth of the Nile was exchanged for the treasures of the Mediterranean. Egyptian grain and priceless papyrus flowed out, while Greek silver, olive oil, and fine pottery flowed in, all taxed heavily within its harbors. At the city's heart stood the magnificent Temple of Ammon, a religious center so powerful that pharaohs journeyed there to have their divine rule legitimized. The sheer scale of wealth recovered from the silt is staggering. Colossal statues of gods and pharaohs, gold coins, intricate jewelry, and the eerie, preserved wrecks of over 60 ships have all been pulled from the deep. They paint a picture of a city drowning in prosperity. So what could possibly bring such a powerhouse to its knees? The culprit was not an enemy army, but the very ground the city was built upon. Thonis-Heracleion was constructed on unstable clay soil. Scientists believe a massive earthquake, perhaps around the 8th century, triggered a phenomenon called liquefaction. The solid ground, shaken violently, instantly turned into a liquid slurry, unable to support the weight of the grand city above. Buildings, temples, and monuments simply sank into the quaking mire, swallowed by the Mediterranean in a single, catastrophic event. The economic shockwave was immediate and profound. A primary artery of Mediterranean trade was severed overnight. Egypt could no longer use its main port to connect with the Greek world, forcing a frantic and costly reorientation of its entire delta trade network. The loss of Thonis-Heracleion demonstrates with brutal clarity how the fortunes of empires can be undone not by war, but by a single, unpredictable geological shudder. As the silt slowly reclaims these sunken wonders, one cannot help but wonder what other legendary cities, whose names are now only whispers in old texts, await discovery. From the Mediterranean, we now sail to the Indian Ocean, to a city whose name was not just a place, but a byword for unimaginable riches. The name Muziris became synonymous with wealth itself in the markets of ancient Rome. Roman historians wrote of this Indian port as a place where black pepper, brilliant gemstones, and delicate Chinese silks arrived in such abundance that the very air was thick with their aromas. This was not a minor trading outpost. Muziris was the undisputed linchpin of Indo-Roman commerce, a direct bridge between the Mediterranean world and the incredible riches of the Indian subcontinent. Roman merchants in their daring wooden ships would harness the powerful monsoon winds, a perilous but necessary gamble, to make the annual journey to its shores. They arrived with holds full of gold coins, fine wine, and expensive glassware, all to be exchanged for the spices that Rome's elite craved. The economic importance of this single port to the Roman Empire cannot be overstated. It was a vital artery pumping luxury goods directly into the heart of a civilization, and its taxes filled the imperial treasury. Then, around the 1st century, Muziris simply vanished from all historical records. It was erased as if it had never existed. Modern excavations near the town of Patanum in Kerala have finally provided tangible proof of the city's legend. Archaeologists have unearthed Roman amphorae, the ceramic containers used for transporting wine and olive oil, lying side by side with local Indian pottery and even Roman copper coins. This is the silent, sun-baked evidence of a marketplace that once thrummed with a dozen languages, a place where East and West met not in conflict but in commerce. The cause of its disappearance is believed to be a sudden, catastrophic environmental shift. Perhaps the Periyar River, the city's lifeblood, dramatically changed its course, silting up the vital harbor and turning it into a swamp. Or a massive tsunami born in the Indian Ocean may have scoured the entire settlement from the coastline in a single, violent surge. The economic consequences were profound and lasting. The loss of Muziris created a sudden, gaping hole in the spice trade, a disruption that Rome, already straining under its own weight, struggled to overcome. It forced a costly and difficult search for new overland routes, but the direct maritime connection was severed. This event underscores a haunting reality. Even the most prosperous and powerful trading hubs were utterly vulnerable to the whims of nature. The desperate Roman need for spices, now harder to obtain, would eventually echo down through the centuries, indirectly fueling the age of European exploration as nations sought new ways to reach the source of these treasures. Conquest, however, could be just as final as any flood. Our next city was a Phoenician powerhouse whose fate was sealed not by water but by the sword. The magnificent dual ports of Carthage were a masterwork of military and economic engineering. Imagine a vast circular harbor carved from the earth with a single, narrow entrance. This was the Carthon, the secret heart of the Carthaginian war fleet. At its center stood a massive tower, allowing admirals to observe every one of the hundreds of warships sheltered within its protected basin. Adjacent to this naval fortress lay the sprawling rectangular merchant port, a constant cacophony of languages and commerce where goods from Britain, West Africa, and the Levant were unloaded and traded. This two-part system was the engine of an empire built not on land but on sea lanes. It was this very success that sealed its fate. Rome, after decades of brutal conflict in the Punic Wars, could not abide a rival. In 146 BC, after a grueling siege, the legions broke through. They did not just conquer Carthage, they systematically annihilated it. For days, the city was put to the torch and its people sold into slavery. Then, in a final, chilling act of symbolic erasure, the Romans are said to have sowed the fields with salt, cursing the very earth so that nothing, not even commerce, could ever grow there again. This was more than a military victory, it was a calculated economic takeover. With its greatest competitor utterly erased from the map, Rome could now monopolize the entire Mediterranean trade network. The wealth that once flowed into Carthage was ruthlessly redirected, fueling the massive expansion of Rome's own port at Ostia and bankrolling its transformation from a republic into a world-spanning empire. The annihilation of Carthage poses a stark question. When is the destruction of a city not an act of war, but a strategic business decision? It shows us that the most permanent way to win a trade war is to ensure your rival has no port left to sail from. From the salt-scorched shores of the Mediterranean, our journey takes us to a city that faced a different, slower kind of enemy, one not of armies but of sand and dust. Deep in the heart of the Arabian desert, a city of myth awaited discovery, Ubar, hailed as the Atlantis of the sands, was the epicenter of an ancient economy built on fragrance. For centuries, its massive camel caravans navigated treacherous dunes, carrying a treasure more valuable than gold, frankincense. This aromatic resin, harvested from the scraggly trees of southern Arabia, was not a mere luxury. It was a spiritual necessity burned in the temples of Rome, the courts of Babylon, and the altars of Jerusalem. Controlling this trade made Ubar inconceivably wealthy, a glittering oasis of power in an otherwise barren landscape. Its legend was so potent that many scholars dismissed it as pure fantasy, a parable of a city punished for its arrogance. Then, in the 1990s, satellite radar and ground excavations uncovered the truth. They revealed the outlines of a massive, octagonal fortress with towering walls and strong bastions, a hub designed to protect and manage the immense wealth flowing through its gates. This was no simple watering hole. It was a sophisticated command center for the incense trade. Its downfall, however, was written into its very success. The city was built atop a large limestone cavern, a natural reservoir that provided its vital water. Generations of drawing water and the constant rumble of heavy caravans likely weakened the cavern's roof until around 300 AD, it catastrophically collapsed. In a single event, the city was swallowed by the desert it had mastered. The economic and cultural shockwaves were immediate. The primary source of frankincense for the Western world was abruptly severed, causing shortages and skyrocketing prices. The kingdoms of southern Arabia, whose influence was entirely tied to this trade, saw their power dramatically wane. New, more difficult overland routes had to be established, but the golden age of the incense road was over. Ubar stands as a timeless monument to a dangerous truth. A civilization can be brought low not by invasion, but by the unsustainable consumption of the single resource that gave it life. How many other brilliant cities have been consumed by the very thing that built them? From the slow collapse of a desert capital, we now travel to a city that met a far more violent and instantaneous end. A Mediterranean marvel obliterated by volcanic fury. The earth shook for just a few terrifying moments in the winter of 373 BC. When the sun rose over the Corinthian Gulf, the vibrant city of Helike was simply gone. This was no mere town. Helike was a leading member of the powerful Achaean League, a bustling port whose ships dominated trade routes across the region. Its wealth was legendary and its influence extended far beyond its harbor walls. Most significant of all, Helike was the primary center for the worship of Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes. Its grand sanctuary drew pilgrims from across Greece, all seeking the favor of the very deity who would soon, in the eyes of the ancient world, turn against them. The city's total annihilation was so complete, so utterly devastating, that for centuries its location remained a mystery, its existence fading into a cautionary tale whispered by philosophers and historians. The event was interpreted by everyone from Plato to the common citizen as a clear act of divine punishment. The sea god had reclaimed his most devoted city in a single, violent night. Modern geology has revealed the horrifying sequence of events. A massive earthquake first leveled the city's structures. Then, as the ground liquefied, a colossal tsunami swept in from the Gulf, dragging the entire ruined landscape and its inhabitants beneath the waves. The city sank into a submerged chasm, and the sea poured in to cover it forever. For over 2,000 years, Helike was a ghost. Then, in the late 20th century, archaeologists finally discovered its remains, buried deep under layers of silt and clay on the Gulf seabed. They found a city frozen in a single moment of terror, its port structures, pottery, and bronze coins preserved exactly as they fell. The economic impact was immediate. A key maritime hub vanished, disrupting trade networks that relied on its central location. But the cultural and philosophical shockwave was even more profound. The destruction of Poseidon's own city forced Greek thinkers to confront the brutal, indiscriminate power of the natural world. It sparked deep debates about the relationship between the gods and humanity, and whether divine will or blind physical forces truly shaped human destiny. Helike stands as one of history's most poignant examples of tragic irony, a stark reminder that the sea which grants fortune offers no protection from its own fury. This story of a city lost to the waves would echo for centuries, eventually blending with other tales to create one of the world's most enduring legends. The legend of Atlantis may have its roots in a very real and terrifying event. On the island of Thera, a magnificent city named Akrotiri thrived more than 3,600 years ago. This was not a simple village but a sophisticated Minoan metropolis, a crucial hub in a vast Bronze Age trading network that stretched across the Aegean Sea. Walking through its streets, you would have seen multi-story buildings with intricate staircases, walls adorned with breathtaking frescoes of ships and antelopes, and an advanced underground drainage system that rivals modern plumbing. This was a society of immense wealth and artistry, its prosperity built entirely on its command of the sea lanes. Then, around 1600 BC, the volcano at the island's heart exploded in one of the most violent eruptions in human history. Akrotiri was not merely damaged, it was entombed under meters of volcanic ash, preserved in an instant like a time capsule. The catastrophe did not end on Thera. The eruption generated colossal tsunamis that radiated outward, slamming into the coast of Crete, the heartland of the Minoan civilization. The waves would have obliterated the Minoan fleet, their very source of power, and salted their fertile farmlands, crippling their economy. The intricate trade networks that had fueled the Aegean world for centuries were severed in a single day. This single geological event likely triggered the swift decline of the entire Minoan civilization. The memory of this lost, advanced society, swallowed by the sea, echoes powerfully in Plato's later description of Atlantis, a powerful island nation, advanced beyond its years, that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night. The story of Akrotiri shows us how the trauma of a real cataclysm can be woven into the fabric of myth, a warning passed down through generations. the power vacuum left by the fallen Minoans was quickly filled by the rising Mycenaean Greeks, who would go on to shape the classical world we know. This raises a profound question: how much of our oldest legends are not mere stories, but the ghostly memories of actual, world-shattering disasters? From the ash-buried wonders of the Aegean, our search for lost cities leads us to the cold, anoxic depths of the Black Sea. The slow, relentless advance of silt can be a more final sentence than any earthquake. On the shores of the Black Sea, the prosperous port of Dionysopolis learned this lesson over centuries. Founded by Greek colonists drawn to its sheltered bay, the city grew into a vital Roman hub, its docks bustling with ships carrying two essential commodities: grain to feed the empire's northern legions and wine to slake their thirst. Its wealth and identity were so intertwined with commerce that its very coins bore the image of Dionysus, the god of wine and celebration, a testament to the city's primary export. Archaeologists have uncovered stone inscriptions here that read like ancient business contracts, meticulously detailing trade agreements and tariffs, the dry paperwork of a thriving economy. But the sea that gave Dionysopolis life was also quietly plotting its end. Rivers feeding into the bay carried immense loads of sediment, year after year, slowly depositing it at the mouth of the harbor. There was no single catastrophe, no day of reckoning. Instead, the water just became shallower and shallower. The great grain ships with their deep drafts could no longer reach the stone quays. One by one, the merchants left for deeper, more accessible ports like nearby Odessos. The economic lifeblood of the city slowed to a trickle and then stopped entirely. The harbor became a marsh, then a meadow, until the sea was a distant shimmer on the horizon, a memory to a place that was once a gateway to the world. The magnificent temple of Dionysus, which once welcomed sailors from across the Black Sea, now stood landlocked and isolated, a monument to a forgotten prosperity. This gradual asphyxiation poses a hauntingly modern question. How do you fight an enemy that gives no dramatic warning, that claims your future not with a bang but with a whisper? The fate of Dionysopolis is a powerful lesson in the unsustainable use of a landscape, a slow-motion disaster that forced trade to simply route around a dying city. While some ports faded quietly into the earth, others were buried by legends of treasure so vast they sparked a centuries-long obsession. Port Royal's reputation was so infamous that it was known across the Atlantic as the wickedest city on earth. By the late 1600s, this Jamaican harbor was not merely a town but a sprawling, chaotic fortress of piracy and profit. It served as the official base for English privateers licensed to attack Spanish ships, making it the primary funnel for plundered New World silver. The city's taverns and warehouses overflowed with stolen treasure, sugar, and the tragic human cargo of the transatlantic slave trade. Its wealth was so immense that it was considered one of the richest English colonies in the world, a place where gold was commonplace and morality was negotiable. Then, on the morning of June 7, 1692, the ground began to convulse. A massive earthquake, followed by a tsunami and subsequent landslides, caused entire sections of the city to simply slide into the sea. In a matter of minutes, 2/3 of Port Royal vanished beneath the waves, as if the ocean had finally reclaimed its ill-gotten gains. Contemporary preachers across Europe hailed the disaster as a clear act of divine judgment, a punishment for the city's overwhelming sin. Yet the real consequence was a seismic shift in colonial economics. The British Crown, stripped of its primary Caribbean hub, had no choice but to pour resources into developing the nearby settlement of Kingston. This new city was planned not for pirates but for respectable, sustainable trade. Kingston quickly grew into the commercial and political heart of Jamaica, a role it holds to this day. The cataclysm that erased Port Royal effectively sanitized British colonial operations, transferring power from lawless freebooters to structured mercantile interests. Modern underwater excavations have revealed a time capsule frozen in silt. Archaeologists have found perfectly preserved streets, buildings, and even the skeletons of residents caught in the final moments of the disaster, offering a hauntingly intimate look at the daily life of a city frozen in its own vice. The dramatic end of Port Royal forces us to ask, how does the story of a city's destruction, especially one framed as moral punishment, shape how we remember its true economic role? We often let the narrative of sin overshadow the cold, hard calculus of trade and power. From a city swallowed by the sea for its wickedness, we journey to one that was simply forgotten, buried by the relentless advance of sand. The artificial harbor of Leptis Magna was a declaration of imperial power carved from the North African coast, commissioned by the city's most famous son, Emperor Septimius Severus. This was not a simple docking area. It was a sprawling, engineered marvel with monumental quays, towering lighthouses, and vast warehouses designed to manage the immense flow of grain and olive oil from the African hinterland to the heart of Rome. The wealth this port generated was staggering, funding the construction of the city's grand colonnaded streets, immense basilicas, and triumphal arches that still stand today as a testament to its prosperity. This was the apex of Roman ambition in Africa, a city built to last for millennia, yet its decline was a slow unraveling, a story of how political and environmental forces can conspire to undo even the grandest human achievements. The first blow was political. The Vandal conquests of the 5th century shattered the unified Mediterranean trade network that Leptis Magna depended on. The Vandals were seafarers who disrupted the very sea lanes that were the city's lifelines. Then came the slow, insidious enemy, silt. Without the centralized maintenance and dredging that the Roman imperial administration provided, the magnificent harbor began to choke. The rivers that had once been arteries of commerce now deposited their sediment into the bay, gradually turning deep water into impassable shallows. The final death knell was sounded by Arab raids in the 7th and 8th centuries, which severed the city's last remaining connections to the wider world. The great grain ships stopped coming, the merchants left, and the Sahara Desert, patient and relentless, began to reclaim the streets and forums, burying the grandeur under dunes. For centuries, the precise location of this legendary city was lost to knowledge, its existence fading into a local rumor. Its modern rediscovery revealed a time capsule of Roman Africa, a silent city of breathtaking scale. The fall of Leptis Magna was more than the loss of a single port. It marked the definitive end of large-scale Roman maritime commerce in Africa, a key symptom of the empire's economic fragmentation. This life cycle poses a profound question. How can an empire capable of moving mountains to build a harbor prove utterly powerless to stop the slow accumulation of silt or the shifting tides of political fortune? It reveals that imperial might, for all its grandeur, is often no match for the persistent, grinding pressures of environmental change and geopolitical shift. From the sun-bleached ruins of North Africa, our journey now takes us to the vibrant and mysterious Swahili coast, where a different kind of maritime city flourished and then faded into the jungle. Hidden deep within the coastal forests of Kenya, the silent stone ruins of Gedi whisper of a forgotten cosmopolitan world. This was no isolated village, but a sophisticated Swahili stone town, its coral block houses, grand mosque, and intricate water systems speaking to immense wealth and advanced urban planning. Gedi thrived as a vital node in the vast Indian Ocean trade network, a place where African ivory, mangrove timber, and perhaps even gold from the interior were exchanged for Chinese celadon porcelain, Indian beads, and glassware from the Persian Gulf. Here, African, Arab, and Indian cultures blended into a unique Swahili identity, its influence reaching across the sea. Then, in the early 17th century, something went terribly wrong. The city was not destroyed by war or natural disaster. It was simply abandoned. Its people vanished, leaving their homes and possessions behind, as if they intended to return but never did. The exact reason for this mass exodus remains one of Africa's great historical puzzles. Some theories point to the southward migration of the Gala people, whose movement may have disrupted the inland trade routes that were Gedi's lifeblood. Others suggest a sudden environmental collapse, perhaps a dramatic drop in the local water table that rendered the sophisticated wells and cisterns useless. A third possibility lies with the arrival of Portuguese colonial forces, whose violent attempts to monopolize the Indian Ocean trade shattered the delicate commercial alliances that had sustained cities like Gedi for centuries. The eerie, vine-choked streets of Gedi today are a poignant monument to a vibrant, interconnected culture that simply faded from memory. Its quiet disappearance, and that of similar Swahili towns, forced a complete reconfiguration of trade along the East African coast, concentrating power in other ports that were better able to withstand the new colonial pressures. Gedi's story forces us to confront a haunting reality. A city can vanish so completely that not even the reason for its end survives, leaving only silent stones and unanswerable questions. This mystery of a lost world connects to an even older legend, one woven into the foundational stories of multiple civilizations, the tale of a city drowned by a world-altering flood. The line between sacred myth and maritime history blurs beneath the waves off India's western coast. Ancient Sanskrit texts sing of Dwarka, a city of unparalleled splendor, with streets of gold and palaces encrusted with jewels, founded by the divine King Lord Krishna. According to these scriptures, upon Krishna's departure from the world, his magnificent capital was reclaimed by the ocean, vanishing in a single cataclysmic event. For centuries, this was considered purely a story of faith, a spiritual allegory with no basis in physical reality. Then, marine archaeologists began to explore the seabed near the modern town of Dwarka. What they found was startling. Submerged stone structures, ancient pillars, and a trove of artifacts, including pottery and bronze objects, were discovered, some dating back over 3,000 years. These were not the remains of a small fishing village, but of a significant fortified port settlement. The evidence strongly suggests that a major maritime city did indeed exist here, one that could have controlled trade along the crucial Arabian Sea routes. Its sudden submergence would have been an economic earthquake, severing a key link in the chain of ports that connected the Indian subcontinent to the Middle East and beyond. The ongoing search for Dwarka is a powerful convergence of science and soul. For archaeologists, each retrieved stone block is a clue to understanding ancient urban planning and trade. For millions of devotees, however, every artifact is a sacred relic, a tangible affirmation of their deepest beliefs. This search does more than just drive discovery. It actively preserves a living culture, reinforcing a spiritual identity that has been passed down for generations. How does the quest for a sunken city shape our understanding of the past and our connection to it in the present? The answer lies not just in the stones on the seabed, but in the enduring power of a story that refuses to be forgotten. From the legendary shores of India, our voyage eastward leads us into the watery labyrinth of the Mekong Delta. Deep within the Mekong Delta's watery labyrinth, the lost city of Ok-Io reveals a forgotten chapter of global connection. For 6 centuries, this bustling port of the Funan Kingdom was the crucial meeting point for the ancient world's greatest economic powers. Its canals teemed with ships from India, its warehouses stacked with goods from Imperial China and even the distant Roman Empire. The sheer diversity of artifacts unearthed here tells a silent but powerful story. Archaeologists have found Roman gold medallions from the reign of Antoninus Pius resting alongside Persian glassware and intricate statues of Hindu gods. This was not a remote outpost. It was a vibrant, cosmopolitan hub where East and West converged on a scale that would not be seen again in the region for over 1,000 years. The city itself was a marvel of hydraulic engineering, laid out in a precise grid crisscrossed by a sophisticated network of canals. These waterways served a dual purpose, draining the swampy land for agriculture while also functioning as liquid highways for transporting goods directly from the deep-sea vessels to the city's bustling markets. This intricate system allowed Ak-Io to flourish, controlling the flow of spices, silks, and precious metals between two continental giants. Yet, by the 7th century, this great interchange was silent. The city was completely abandoned, its grand canals slowly filling with silt and its temples reclaimed by the jungle. Its decline was likely a slow death by 1,000 cuts. Shifting environmental conditions may have altered the very waterways that gave it life, making navigation more difficult, but the decisive blow was political. Just as Ak-Io began to fade, a new maritime empire, Srivijaya, was rising to power far to the south in what is now Indonesia. Srivijaya established a new, more efficient network of ports that fundamentally redirected the main trade routes between China and India. Merchants, always seeking the fastest and safest passage, simply bypassed the Mekong Delta altogether. The story of Ak-Io poses a hauntingly modern question. What determines whether a great commercial center can reinvent itself when the world changes around it? This city had the engineering, the wealth, and the connections, yet it could not survive the seismic shift in geopolitical tides. Its fate reminds us that a port's greatest threat is not always the rising sea, but the changing currents of commerce and power. From the silent canals of Southeast Asia, we now sail to the Mediterranean, where another city met a far more dramatic and watery end. Beneath the crystal-clear waters off the coast of southern Greece lies a ghostly grid of streets older than the pyramids. This is Pavlopetri, a city that has been submerged for more than 3,000 years, making it the oldest known sunken city in the entire world. Its discovery shattered our understanding of the Bronze Age, revealing a meticulously planned port with organized roads, courtyards, buildings, and even graves, all laid out with a sophistication no one thought possible for its time. This was not a haphazard settlement. Pavlopetri was a key commercial harbor, a vital link in a chain connecting the Minoan civilization of Crete with the rising Mycenaean powers of the mainland. Its merchants likely traded in vibrant textiles, practical pottery, and the liquid gold of the ancient world, olive oil, shipping these goods across the Aegean Sea. The city's gradual disappearance was a slow-motion tragedy driven by a one-two punch of geological forces. The land itself was gradually sinking due to seismic activity along local fault lines, while at the same time global sea levels were slowly creeping upward from the melting glaciers of the last ice age. Eventually, around 1000 BC, the sea claimed its streets forever, silencing a bustling port and severing a critical trade node. The loss of Pavlopetri and other settlements like it represents a forgotten prologue to Mediterranean commerce, a lost chapter in the story of how early societies first connected across the water. Its silent, underwater grid forces us to ask a profound question. How much of our earliest maritime history, the very foundation of our interconnected world, is still lying on the seabed, waiting for its story to be told? While the sea slowly consumed one city, a river's sudden betrayal could destroy another in a heartbeat. The wealth of Siraf was so immense that its merchants were said to build their mansions from teakwood imported directly from India. For centuries, this Persian Gulf port was the undisputed gateway between the Islamic world and the riches of the East. Its shipyards constructed the strongest vessels to brave the monsoon winds, massive wooden dhows designed to carry Persian glassware and textiles to India and return with mountains of spices, Chinese porcelain, and the finest African timber. But the city's true heart beat with a local treasure, pearls. Siraf's divers harvested iridescent gems from the seafloor, creating a luxury industry that supplied caliphs and kings across the known world. This was a city built on wind and water, its prosperity dictated by the annual rhythms of the ocean. Yet by the 12th century, this vibrant metropolis was a ghost town, its grand mosques and bustling bazaars standing empty. The causes of its decline were a slow, compounding cascade. A series of powerful earthquakes shattered its infrastructure and damaged the intricate water systems that sustained life in the arid climate. Simultaneously, the natural process of siltation, which the city had once managed with constant dredging, began to choke its vital harbor. The final, decisive blow was economic. As Siraf struggled with these environmental challenges, a new rival port, Hormuz, rose to power just down the coast. Hormuz offered better, deeper natural harbors and more favorable political alliances, attracting the merchants and their lucrative caravans away from the struggling city. The population of Siraf did not perish in a single catastrophe. They simply voted with their feet, migrating to the new center of opportunity and leaving their magnificent city to the desert winds. The ruins that remain are a silent testament to a profound shift in global economics. The fall of Siraf did not end trade in the Persian Gulf. It simply rerouted it, proving that the pathways of commerce are always flowing, always searching for the most efficient channel. How many of our own modern hubs are just one earthquake, one new shipping route away from becoming the next silent ruin? This pattern of rise and fall was not confined to the old world, as a mysterious civilization in the Americas would soon demonstrate. Rising from a shallow lagoon on a remote Pacific island, the city of Madol defies easy explanation. This is not a city built on land, but a collection of nearly 100 artificial islets constructed directly atop a living coral reef. Massive basalt logs, some weighing many tons, were stacked like Lincoln logs to form formidable walls and platforms that created a ceremonial capital out of nothing but stone and sea. This was the heart of the Sordilor dynasty, a political and spiritual center so unique it has earned the nickname the Venice of the Pacific. Yet its purpose was not commerce in the way we normally think of it. There were no bustling markets filled with foreign spices or warehouses overflowing with trade goods. The city's primary export was power. Its very construction was a staggering display of that power, a statement of absolute control over both people and resources. Transporting those colossal basalt columns from quarries across the island required a sophisticated and dedicated maritime network. Think of the coordination needed, the fleets of outrigger canoes and rafts, the knowledge of tides and currents, and the sheer human labor commanded to move a mountain, piece by piece, across the water. This was not trade for profit, but a logistics operation on an imperial scale, all dedicated to building a capital for the elite, separate and elevated from the common people. The city's mysterious collapse around 1628 was as dramatic as its rise. Oral histories tell of a warrior from a neighboring island, Isoklekel, who led an invasion that overthrew the oppressive Sordilor rulers. But the story is likely more complex. The very act of building and maintaining Madol may have sown the seeds of its own destruction. the dynasty's extreme demands on the local population for labor and resources, particularly the precious breadfruit that was a dietary staple, could have led to widespread famine and social unrest. The intricate canals that wove through the city may have also slowly poisoned the local environment, as the construction smothered the underlying reef and disrupted the natural tidal flows that supported the marine life the people depended on. The city's fall shattered the unified political structure of Pohnpei, fragmenting the island into competing chiefdoms and severing the unique maritime control the Sodalors had wielded. The silence that fell over its haunting, waterlogged ruins left a void in Micronesian culture that echoes to this day. Nan Madol forces us to expand our definition of a maritime city. It was not a hub of exchange, but a monument to control, a place where the sea was not a highway for merchants, but a moat for kings. Its story asks us, what does the ambition of a civilization ultimately cost its environment and its people? This pattern of a great port being choked off from the sea by the land itself was not unique to the Pacific, as the fate of a crucial Roman harbor would soon demonstrate. The lifeblood of Rome did not flow through its grand aqueducts, but through the bustling docks of its primary seaport, Ostia. Here, at the very mouth of the Tiber River, an endless stream of ships arrived from every corner of the empire. The most vital cargo of all was Egyptian grain, millions of tons of it, unloaded by countless workers to feed the ever-growing population of the capital. This logistical miracle made Ostia one of the most economically critical spots on the entire planet, a vibrant, noisy, and perpetually active gateway where the wealth of the Mediterranean was funneled directly into the city's stomach. Yet this crucial artery was slowly clogging. The Tiber, the very river that gave the port its purpose, was also its quiet executioner. With every flood, the river deposited immense loads of silt and sediment directly into the harbor basin. Year after year, the water grew shallower. The massive grain freighters with their deep drafts found it increasingly difficult to navigate the approach and dock at the stone quays. Delays became commonplace and the risk of shipwreck at the harbor entrance grew. The Roman Empire was facing a slow, creeping crisis of distribution, one that threatened to starve its own heart. How does the greatest power on earth fight an enemy as patient and relentless as mud? The answer was not to save Ostia, but to abandon it. Emperor Claudius initiated a staggering feat of engineering, constructing an entirely new, artificial harbor a few miles north of the silt-choked river mouth. This new port, called Portus, featured massive breakwaters and a monumental lighthouse to guide ships safely into its deep, dredged basins. Later, Emperor Trajan expanded it further, adding a magnificent hexagonal inner basin that could shelter hundreds of vessels at once. This was not a simple infrastructure upgrade. It was a multi-generational, imperial-scale admission that nature could not be defeated, only circumvented at an astronomical cost. The economic shift was absolute. Maritime trade swiftly migrated to the new, efficient harbors of Portus. The docks of Ostia fell quiet, its warehouses emptied, and its purpose faded. The city that once fed an empire was left to slowly decay, its streets eventually buried by the very river sediments that had strangled it. The colossal investment in Portus underscores a timeless truth. Even the most powerful empire is ultimately subject to the physical world, forced to pour its treasure and ingenuity into a perpetual struggle against geography itself. From the silted-up heart of ancient Rome, our journey now takes us to the treacherous waters of the Red Sea. The silence that fell over Berenice Troglodytica was the silence of a severed lifeline. Founded by Ptolemy II to funnel the riches of India directly into the heart of Egypt, this Red Sea port was an act of geographical genius. Its location was chosen for pure efficiency, allowing merchant ships to cut across the Indian Ocean, bypassing the longer, more treacherous coastal route around Arabia. For centuries, this was where the scents of the East first touched African soil. Incense, pepper, and silks were unloaded onto its sun-bleached docks, then loaded onto the backs of camels for a grueling overland journey to the Nile. From there, these luxuries would flow north to Alexandria and onward to the endless appetite of Rome. The city itself was a testament to this global connection. Excavations have revealed not just vast warehouses for storing goods, but temples dedicated to a pantheon of gods, from Egyptian deities to a hybrid Greco-Roman Serapis, and evidence of a vibrant community of Greek, Roman, Arab, and Indian traders. This was a specialized economic machine, perfectly calibrated to serve a single, vast customer, the Roman Empire, and that was its fatal weakness. When Rome began its long, slow collapse, the consequences for Berenice were not gradual, they were absolute. The empire's economic power fragmented, its demand for Eastern luxuries plummeted, and the complex, expensive system of shipping and caravan transport that Berenice relied upon became financially unsustainable. The merchants simply left, the camels stopped coming, and the desert sands, patient and relentless, began to drift through the empty streets and into the silent warehouses. The port did not fall to a siege or a natural disaster. It was made obsolete, a perfectly functional tool in a world that no longer needed it. Its story forces us to confront a stark economic truth. A city can be brilliantly designed and strategically perfect, yet its survival is entirely dependent on the health of the political and economic system it serves. When that system unravels, even the greatest hubs can be left as ghost towns, monuments to a prosperity that simply packed up and moved on. This pattern of a city's fate being tied to a single, glittering resource finds its ultimate expression in a place whose very name has become a synonym for wealth itself. A legend can be more powerful than any fleet of ships. Deep in the Colombian highlands, the circular, emerald waters of Lake Guatavita hold the origin of one of history's most potent and destructive myths. This was the sacred site of the Muisca people, and here they performed a ritual that European ears would fatally misinterpret. A new ruler, covered in gold dust, would journey into the center of the lake on a raft laden with gold and emeralds. As he reached the center, he would offer these treasures to the waters as a sacred offering, an act of spiritual balance. To the Muisca, this was a ceremony of deep religious significance. To the conquistadors who heard the story, it was a literal invitation, proof of a city of gold they called El Dorado. The search for this phantom city became an obsession that consumed generations of explorers. They diverted rivers, they dug tunnels into the lake's rim, all in a frantic effort to drain the water and claim the imagined fortune at its bottom. They found some artifacts, but never the legendary city. The real treasure of the Americas, however, was not a single sunken hoard. It was the continent itself. The desperate hunt for El Dorado drove the Spanish deeper into South America than they might have otherwise gone, leading directly to the discovery of the immense silver mines of Potosi. That silver, mined at a horrific human cost, would soon flood across the Atlantic, fueling the global economy for centuries and bankrolling Spain's empire. The myth of a single lost city of gold triggered the Columbian Exchange, the monumental transfer of plants, animals, people, and diseases between the old world and the new. This was not the quiet disappearance of a port, but a cataclysmic collision of worlds, all sparked by a story. The legend of El Dorado did not just redirect trade routes, it forged entirely new ones, permanently weaving the Americas into a global system of commerce and exploitation. How many of our world's economic maps were drawn not by cartographers but by storytellers? From the myth-charged waters of a highland lake, our search for vanished hubs takes us to the cold, strategic shores of the Baltic Sea and a Viking port that connected the known world. The strategic silence that fell over Birka was not a surrender to the sea, but to the shifting landscape of power. On the island of Birka, this Viking Age metropolis was a fortress of commerce, its wooden docks bristling with ships carrying silver from the Islamic Caliphate, fine Frankish glassware, and most lucratively, furs and slaves from the northern wilderness. Its position in Lake Maleron was a masterstroke of economic geography, a perfect midway point where trade routes from the Volga River in the east met the sea lanes leading west to the North Atlantic. The graves that dot the island tell a silent story of this global reach, holding cowrie shells from the Red Sea and coins minted in Baghdad, treasures buried with merchants who had touched the edges of the known world. Yet by the late 10th century, this buzzing hub was completely abandoned, its people relocating to the new town of Sigtuna on the mainland. The harbor may have been slowly choking on silt, but the true cause of its death was political. As the Swedish kingdom began to coalesce under a single, powerful monarch, the old, independent trading centers like Birka, ruled by their own laws and chieftains, became inconvenient. A centralized king needed a centralized port, one he could directly control and tax. Sigtuna was that port, founded by royal decree with a Christian church at its center, signaling a new era of royal authority and religious change. The merchants simply followed the power and the protection it offered. Birka's decline was not an accident. It was a deliberate rerouting of economic lifeblood by an emerging state, a clear signal that commerce flows where kings command. This pattern of political consolidation reshaping the map of trade was not unique to the cold north, as the fate of a legendary Syrian port would soon reveal. The clay tablets of Ugarit captured the final, frantic moments of a collapsing world. This was not a backwater town, but a dazzling Bronze Age metropolis on the Syrian coast, a central switchboard for the entire known world. Its scribes meticulously recorded the flow of goods that sustained empires, copper from Cyprus, ivory from Egypt, and wine and olive oil from the Aegean, all passing through its bustling harbors. The city was a melting pot of cultures, its libraries holding texts in a dozen different languages and scripts, including the very first alphabet, a revolutionary invention born from the need for faster, more efficient trade communication. Ugarit was the embodiment of a globalized system, a place where diplomats from the Hittite Empire and the pharaohs of Egypt negotiated treaties and merchants from Mycenaean Greece bartered for precious metals. Then, around 1185 BC, everything stopped. The city was violently sacked and burned to the ground, its grand palaces reduced to ash and its vibrant ports left in ruins. The attackers are widely believed to be the mysterious Sea Peoples, a coalition of marauders whose assaults contributed to the cataclysmic late Bronze Age collapse. The clay tablets tell this story too. One of the last messages ever sent from Ugarit was a desperate plea for help from the Hittite king, a cry that went unanswered because the Hittite capital itself was already burning. The destruction of Ugarit was not an isolated tragedy. It was a single node in a vast network that failed simultaneously. The entire intricate system of international diplomacy and maritime trade that had flourished for centuries shattered within a generation. The knowledge of writing was lost in many regions, long-distance travel ceased, and the Mediterranean world plunged into a dark age that would last for hundreds of years. The sophisticated economic engine of Ugarit, with its commodity prices and complex treaties, vanished as if it had never existed. Its fate poses one of history's most chilling questions. Our own world is built on a web of supply chains and digital communication far more complex than Ugarit's. Could a single, cascading failure of our interconnected systems bring our own globalized age to a sudden, silent halt? The burning of this Syrian port is a stark reminder that civilizations are not mountains, but intricate spiderwebs, beautiful and strong, yet vulnerable to a single, sharp shock. From the ashes of a globalized Bronze Age, our search leads us to a city that was consumed not by fire, but by the relentless, patient embrace of the jungle. The ambition of a single king can build a city as swiftly as it can condemn it. Deep in the Cambodian jungle, far from the well-trodden paths to Angkor Wat, the sprawling complex of Ko-Kur rises from the undergrowth. For a brief but brilliant 2 decades in the 10th century, this was the heart of the Khmer Empire, a new capital forged by the will of King Jayavarman IV. Its centerpiece is a breathtaking 7-tiered pyramid temple that scrambles towards the sky, a statement of power meant to rival any structure at Angkor. The scale of construction here was staggering, with dozens of major temples and immense reservoirs built in an incredibly short time. This was not just a ceremonial center, it was a colossal economic undertaking. The sheer volume of labor, sandstone, and resources required to build Ko-Kur in such a remote location suggests it was more than a royal whim. Its position likely allowed it to control vital overland trade routes, channeling wealth from the highlands and perhaps even from the growing maritime networks to the south. Then, as suddenly as it began, the grand experiment ended. When Jayavarman IV died, his successor moved the capital back to Angkor, pulling the entire imperial court, its army of artisans, and the flow of state wealth back to the old center. Ko-Kur was not conquered or destroyed. It was simply switched off. The economic lifeblood that sustained its frantic construction was redirected, and the city was left to the relentless jungle. Its magnificent temples, some still unfinished, became ghosts in the canopy, their purpose forgotten for 1,000 years. This abrupt abandonment forces us to ask a profound question. How much of our economic landscape is shaped not by geography or market forces, but by the personal decisions of the powerful? A king's desire for a new legacy created Ko-Kur, and another king's preference for tradition sealed its fate, proving that the map of trade can be redrawn with a single royal decree. This pattern of a city's fate being tied to the whims of its ruler finds a stark parallel back in the ancient Mediterranean world. The wealth of Sybaris was so legendary it birthed its own word. This Greek colony in southern Italy was not merely rich, it was a byword for decadence, a place where citizens were said to sleep on rose petals and train their horses to dance to flute music. Its power was built on a foundation of unparalleled agricultural fertility and a stranglehold over key trade routes in the region. The city minted its own coins and its merchants commanded the seas, their influence stretching across the Mediterranean. This immense prosperity, however, bred a dangerous and bitter rivalry with the neighboring city of Croton. The people of Croton were famously austere, followers of a strict Pythagorean philosophy that stood in stark contrast to the Sybaritic lifestyle next door. The tension was not just cultural, it was a pure, unadulterated economic competition. In 510 BC, that rivalry reached its horrifying climax. The army of Croton marched on Sybaris, defeated its forces, and then undertook a chillingly deliberate act of erasure. They did not just sack the city. They captured the nearby Krathis River and forcibly diverted its course, channeling the entire river to flow directly over the smoldering ruins of their rival. The water surged through the streets, washing away the magnificent villas and bustling markets, burying the city under a deep layer of silt and mud. It was a hydrological execution. The economic annihilation was absolute. The trade that had once flowed through Sybaris was forcibly redirected, enriching Croton and its allies. the city's very memory was almost lost, surviving only as a cautionary tale of luxury leading to ruin. For centuries, its location was a mystery until modern archaeologists digging through meters of alluvial soil finally uncovered its ghostly outline. The story of Sybaris forces us to confront a brutal reality of ancient economics. When commercial competition reached its absolute peak, the most logical business decision for the victor was not to conquer, but to obliterate, ensuring a rival's port could never again challenge their own. This was a trade war fought not with tariffs, but with water and earth, a permanent solution to a commercial rival. From a city drowned by the hatred of its neighbor, we turn to a port consumed by the ambition of an empire. The very name Thonis-Heracleion vanished so completely it sounded like a myth. Perched on the narrow strait between the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, this Rus principality was the ultimate tollgate, controlling a maritime bottleneck of immense strategic value. For centuries, its princes grew wealthy by taxing every ship that passed, their coffers filled with Byzantine silver, honey, and wax from the northern forests, and the grim human cargo of the slave trade. Thonis-Heracleion was a cultural crossroads where Viking longboats, Greek merchant vessels, and the caravans of the Pontic steppe all converged. Then, in the 12th century, it was simply erased, not just from the map, but from the collective memory of the nations it had once connected. Its location became a subject of scholarly debate, a phantom city many believed was purely fictional. The city fell to a dual assault from both land and water. The Cuban River, its lifeblood, began to shift its course over time, depositing its silt directly into the harbor until the once busy port became a stagnant, impassable marsh. Simultaneously, the nomadic Cumans, fierce warriors of the steppe, increased their pressure, severing the overland trade routes that were the city's other economic artery. Strangled from both directions, Thonis-Heracleion's reason for existing simply evaporated. The economic consequences rippled northward. The Kievan Rus, cut off from the lucrative Black Sea trade, saw a vital source of its wealth and political cohesion dry up, accelerating its own fragmentation into smaller, weaker principalities. The rediscovery of Thonis-Heracleion's ruins in the 18th century was a triumph of archaeology over oblivion, proving a legendary gateway was real. Its story forces us to consider a deeper kind of loss. When a city vanishes so totally that its location is forgotten, it loses its place not just in the ground, but in the story we tell about the past. How many other crucial waypoints have been lost simply because the knowledge of how to find them died with the last trader who sailed there? Our search now carries us across the waves to the Indian Ocean, where the fate of a great port was tied not to a river, but to a single precious tree. The dense forests of Madagascar hide the ruins of a different kind of trading giant. Mahiloka was not a city of grand monuments, but a powerhouse of practical commerce, one of the earliest and most substantial ports on the entire island. For 5 centuries, from the 9th to the 14th, its harbor was a crucial bridge in the Indian Ocean world, connecting the Swahili coast and the Comoros Islands to the immense resources of the Malagasy interior. Its merchants exported a fortune in raw materials, most notably glittering rock crystal and, more significantly, gold, which flowed from the island's highlands to markets across the ocean. The stone walls of its buildings, a rarity in a land of wood and thatch, speak silently of a society with the wealth and organization to invest in permanence. This was a place deeply integrated into a vast economic web, but that very integration was its vulnerability. So why was such a successful hub completely abandoned? The answer lies not in a single disaster, but in the slow, inexorable shift of trade's currents. Perhaps the monsoon winds, the ancient engine of Indian Ocean travel, began to favor slightly different sailing routes, making Mahaloca's location less convenient. More likely, the rise of new, competing ports on the island, like Nosy Manita, offered merchants better facilities or more favorable alliances. The traders and their ships, always seeking the most efficient path, simply began to bypass Mahaloca. Its population, following the opportunity, would have gradually left until the stone houses stood empty and the forest began its patient reclamation. The story of Mahaloca is a quiet one, a slow fade rather than a dramatic collapse. It forces us to ask, what does it mean for a city to be left behind? Its fate represents a pivotal shift in the economic center of gravity for Madagascar itself, a reminder that a port's success is measured not by its walls, but by the willingness of the world's merchants to sail to its shore. This quiet abandonment stands in stark contrast to the violent end that awaited our next city, a place erased not by shifting winds, but by the deliberate fury of a conqueror. Tyre's island fortress was considered unconquerable. Surrounded by towering walls and the open sea, this Phoenician capital controlled the entire Mediterranean supply of a single, breathtaking color. The deep, vibrant purple dye extracted from the murex snail was so difficult to produce that it became worth more than its weight in gold, a symbol of imperial power and divine right for every emperor from Rome to Babylon. Tyre was not just a city, it was a monopoly, and its merchant princes grew immensely wealthy from this exclusive trade. Their ships, the most advanced of the age, ventured beyond the Pillars of Hercules and founded colonies like Carthage, creating a vast commercial network that was the envy of the ancient world. Then came Alexander the Great. Faced with the city's defiant refusal to surrender, the brilliant and ruthless commander did not attempt a futile naval assault. Instead, he ordered his army to build a mole, a massive causeway of stone and rubble, straight from the mainland to the island's walls. Using the very ruins of the old mainland city as building material, his soldiers literally bridged the sea. After a grueling 7-month siege, Alexander's forces breached the defenses and unleashed a terrible slaughter. Though the city physically survived, its spirit was broken. The conquest stripped Tyre of its political independence and, crucially, its monopoly. The secret of the purple dye and the vast trade network that distributed it fell into Greek hands. Alexander's new foundations, especially the Egyptian city of Alexandria, were deliberately designed to become the new centers of commerce, siphoning trade away from the old Phoenician hubs. Tyre continued to exist, but it was now just another port in a Hellenistic world, its unique commercial vitality drained away. Its story forces a difficult question. Can a trading capital truly survive once it loses the power to set its own rules and protect its own secrets? The subjugation of Tyre demonstrates that political freedom and economic dominance are often two sides of the same coin, and that the loss of one inevitably corrodes the other. From a city conquered by a land bridge, we move to one consumed by the sands of time. Rising from the Syrian desert, Palmyra was an oasis of stone and commerce, a maritime power without a sea. Its lifeblood was not the ocean, but the endless camel caravans trudging across the sands, carrying silk from China and spices from India. This city was a brilliant inland port, its magnificent colonnaded streets and towering temples funded entirely by taxing the precious goods flowing between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. The wealth of empires was weighed and traded in its shade, making Palmyra a sovereign commercial powerhouse right on the doorstep of Rome. This independence, embodied by the formidable Queen Zenobia, was a threat Rome could not tolerate. In 273 AD, the legions descended not just to crush a rebellion, but to execute a calculated economic hit. The city was sacked with a thoroughness that spoke of strategic intent, its trade networks dismantled and its power broken forever. The consequences rippled across the globe. With the primary overland Silk Road severed at Palmyra, merchants were forced to look south to the sea. The maritime routes through the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, once a secondary option, suddenly became the main artery for east-west trade. Ports like Berenice and Aden saw a surge in traffic, their fortunes rising as Palmyra's dust settled. This demonstrates a profound and often overlooked truth. The fate of a landlocked caravan city, swallowed by sand and conflict, could directly trigger a golden age for distant ocean harbors, reshaping the flow of commerce across entire hemispheres. How many of our maritime hubs owe their existence to the deliberate destruction of a rival far inland? The desert sands that reclaimed Palmyra's colonnades hold a silent answer, a reminder that trade routes are a nervous system, and a shock in one place can send a tremor through the whole. This pattern of a city being consumed by water finds a different, quieter expression in a place lost not to the sea, but to the deliberate creation of a lake. The skeletons of trees rise from a salt-crusted plain, their branches clawing at an empty sky. This is not an ancient ruin, but the ghost of a 20th century resort. Villa Epicaine was once a thriving destination, a place where thousands flocked to bathe in the therapeutic, buoyant waters of Lake Epicaine. Its economy was built not on spices or silk, but on wellness and leisure, a modern kind of trade that sustained the community for generations. Then, in 1985, after weeks of relentless rainfall, a protective dike gave way. The lake did not simply flood the town, it consumed it. The waters rose slowly and inexorably, swallowing houses, hotels, and streets until the entire city lay under nearly 30 feet of salt water, a modern Atlantis lost not to legend but to a forecast. For decades, it was a sunken memory, a collection of ruins known only to divers and former residents. Only in the 21st century, as the waters slowly receded due to evaporation, did the town's haunting skeleton re-emerge, its buildings encased in a thick, white crust of salt, frozen in the moment the water claimed them. The disaster displaced thousands of people, erasing not just a town but an entire way of life. It stands as a stark, contemporary case study in how climate variability, in this case a period of extreme rainfall, can meet inadequate infrastructure with catastrophic results. This was not a slow silting or a sudden earthquake, but a failure of the modern systems meant to control the very environment that gave the town its purpose. The story of Villa Epicaine powerfully connects the ancient past to our present, proving that the delicate dialogue between human settlement and water is a continuous, ongoing negotiation. What lessons can modern planners and engineers learn from the ghosts of maritime cities past if they are willing to listen? The forces that erased Thonis-Heracleion and Port Royal are not confined to history books. They are hydrological realities that remain with us today. As this modern ghost town silently dries under the Argentine sun, our search for lost centers of commerce carries us back to the ancient world, to a city whose fate was sealed by a river's enduring power. The shifting fortunes of ports were written in the pottery shards of Myos Hormos. This Roman harbor on the Red Sea was a sister port to Berenice, another vital launchpad for the daring monsoon runs to India. From these sun-baked docks, Roman ships, heavily laden with gold and wine, would catch the summer winds for a direct month-long crossing to the Malabar coast, returning with holds bursting with black pepper and precious gems. Myos Hormos thrived on this direct line to unimaginable wealth, its very existence a testament to Roman commercial ambition. Yet, while Berenice endured for centuries, Myos Hormos was abandoned by the end of the 3rd century, a ghost town long before its rival. The evidence for its demise lies in the very ground it was built upon. Its harbor, more exposed and less forgiving than the protected bay of Berenice, was slowly but surely choking on desert silt. Every seasonal windstorm, every flash flood from the arid hills, pushed more sediment into the anchorage, gradually making it too shallow for the deep-drafted merchant vessels. The most poignant proof of its global connections was unearthed not in grand monuments, but in broken pottery. Archaeologists found ceramic fragments inscribed with Tamil Brahmi script, the writing of ancient South India. These were not official documents, but the casual notes and ownership marks of Indian traders or sailors who had lived and worked in this Egyptian port, a tangible whisper of a direct human link across the ocean. The failure of Myos Hormos was a quiet lesson in ancient logistics. It was not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, economic death by 1,000 grains of sand. As maintenance costs rose and accessibility fell, the Roman merchants and imperial administrators made a simple calculation. They shifted their entire operation to the better, deeper harbor of Berenice, just a few miles down the coast. This was not a random event, but a conscious business decision on an imperial scale, rerouting the flow of spice wealth to a more efficient node. The silent ruins of Myos Hormos pose a timeless question for any maritime hub. How do you compete when geography itself turns against you? The answer for the Romans was to simply cut their losses and sail away, leaving one port to die so that another could live. This constant, ruthless competition between harbors was a driving force of ancient economics, where a single silted channel could erase a city from the map of world trade. Such vulnerabilities made ports tempting targets, not just for rival merchants, but for the wolves of the sea. The original alphabet may have traveled to Greece on a ship docking at Al-Mina. Perched on the mouth of the Orontes River, this was not a grand city of marble, but a pragmatic trading post, one of the very first deliberate bridges between the Aegean world and the ancient Near East. Established by Greek traders around the 9th century BC, its warehouses were filled with a different kind of treasure. Alongside raw metals and luxury goods moved something far more revolutionary: ideas. The clay tablets and inscriptions found here suggest a place where Greek and Phoenician merchants lived side by side, a crucible where cultures met and mingled. It is here that many scholars believe the Greeks first encountered the Phoenician alphabet, a system of writing they would adapt and transform into their own, an innovation that would ultimately give birth to Western literature, philosophy, and science. The entire intellectual trajectory of the Western world may have passed through this unassuming port, yet this crucial bridge was shattered, likely in the 8th century BC. The city was violently destroyed, its buildings burned and abandoned. The culprit may have been the rising Assyrian Empire, a land-based power intolerant of such an independent, international hub on its frontier. Or perhaps the Orontes River itself, shifting its delta over time, slowly silted up the harbor, choking the economic life from the settlement. Its destruction severed one of the most vital early conduits of culture, a premature end to an experiment in global connection. When such a bridge is broken, what ideas are lost forever? What plays were never written, what philosophies never conceived because the flow of knowledge was interrupted? The story of Al-Mina forces us to see trade not just in spices and silver, but in the invisible, priceless currency of human thought. Its legacy, however fragmented, paved the way for others, a fragile beginning to a network that would one day encircle the sea. This brings us to our final vanished city, a name that echoes with the weight of countless legends, a place that stands at the very boundary of history and myth. The legend of wise whispers of a city more beautiful than any other, a Breton paradise protected from the ocean by a mighty dike and a single magical key. Its wealth was boundless, its sin even greater, until the king's daughter, Dahat, blinded by passion or pride, gave that key to a mysterious stranger who was the devil in disguise. He unlocked the gates at midnight, and the sea rushed in, drowning the city and all its inhabitants in a single, terrible night. While Wise itself is a story woven from folklore, its power endures because it speaks to a universal and terrifying truth. The tale likely preserves a folk memory of a very real coastal settlement, perhaps on the Bay of Douarnenez, that was consumed by rising sea levels in the early Middle Ages. The narrative of divine punishment for human arrogance gave a moral shape to an otherwise senseless natural disaster, a way for communities to explain the terrifying and unpredictable power of the ocean that both fed and threatened them. This legend, like that of Atlantis, is far more than a simple ghost story. It is a cultural safety mechanism, a way to process the trauma of loss and to encode a vital warning for future generations about the dangers of hubris and the fragility of life at the water's edge. The story of Wise brings our journey through 30 vanished maritime cities to a close, not with a historical fact, but with a powerful echo. It reminds us that some cities achieve their greatest influence not in stone and mortar, but in the enduring power of myth, living on forever in the stories we tell about the sea, our fears, and ourselves. Having explored these 30 lost worlds, from the earthquake-shattered ruins of Thonis-Heracleion to the legend-charged waters of Wise, a single, haunting question now rises to the surface. What do all these stories, scattered across millennia and continents, ultimately have in common? These recurring patterns of collapse reveal a haunting truth about our own world. The environmental forces that erased Thonis-Heracleion and Helike are not confined to the past. Today, our modern coastal megacities face their own versions of these ancient threats, not from vengeful gods, but from the steady creep of rising sea levels and the increasing fury of climate-driven storms. The economic shifts that stranded Mahaloka and starved Berenice find their echo in our own globalized age, where a single disrupted shipping lane or a new trade agreement can redirect fortunes overnight. The political violence that annihilated Carthage and Sybaris reminds us that human conflict remains a potent force capable of severing the most vital economic links in an instant. And the over-reliance on a single resource, so devastating for Ubar and its frankincense, mirrors the precariousness of modern economies built around one industry or commodity. These are not mere stories from a forgotten age. They are a stark blueprint of vulnerabilities that have haunted maritime civilizations for millennia. The silent lesson from 30 sunken cities is that our own hubs of trade and technology are engaged in the same delicate dance with the same timeless forces. The real question is whether we are listening to the whispers from the deep. Their legacy is not just a collection of ruins, but a profound understanding of the cycles that govern the rise and fall of the world's great meeting places. These silent ruins have fundamentally changed how we uncover history. The discovery of cities like Thonis-Heracleion and Pavlopetri did not merely add pages to our history books, they forced us to rewrite entire chapters. Underwater archaeology, born from the search for these lost ports, has given us the tools to read a landscape submerged for millennia, turning mythical places into tangible stone and pottery reality. Each artifact pulled from the silt is a direct message from the past, validating the writings of Herodotus or proving the reach of a Roman merchant, confirming that our oldest stories were often rooted in real events. The voids these cities left behind did not stall commerce, they forced it to evolve. When one port vanished, trade did not simply cease. It was the economic shock that spurred innovation, pushing merchants and empires to find another way. The disappearance of Muziris intensified the search for overland spice routes. The destruction of Carthage cleared the seas for Roman monopoly. Each collapse created a vacuum that was filled by the rise of new hubs like Sigtuna, Hormuz, and eventually the great global ports of our modern era. The economic map of our world was drawn and redrawn by these absences. Culturally, these cities never truly died. They live on in our collective imagination, from the sunken spires of Atlantis to the drowned bells of Wise. They are powerful symbols in our art and literature, eternal reminders of the fleeting nature of power and the enduring human fascination with what lies beneath the waves. They represent our ambition to build against the odds and the humility we learn when nature reclaims its own. Perhaps the most urgent lesson they teach is one of environmental interdependence. The silt that choked Dionysopolis, the earthquake that liquefied Thonis-Heracleion, the rising waters that claimed Villa Epicurene, these are not ancient anomalies. They are the same forces our coastal cities face today, amplified by a changing climate. These lost ports are active participants in our story, not passive relics. They teach us about the necessity of adaptation, the importance of resilient infrastructure, and the profound truth that no civilization, no matter how wealthy or advanced, is immune to the physical world it inhabits. As our journey through these 30 vanished worlds ends, we are left with a final, resonant thought. The fate of these cities is not a closed book. It is a mirror, reflecting the vulnerabilities and aspirations of our own world, asking us what legacy we will leave for the explorers of the distant future to discover. Our voyage through 30 sunken ports reveals a grand and sobering tapestry of human ambition. Across millennia and continents, these cities rose as magnificent hubs of commerce, their docks teeming with the wealth of the known world, only to be washed away by the unpredictable forces of nature, the cold calculus of economics, or the raw fire of conflict. From the earthquake-shattered quays of Thonis-Heracleion to the legend-charged waters of Wise, each story is a unique chapter in the history of global trade, a stark reminder that the pathways of commerce are never permanent. These cities fundamentally changed the fate of trade, not only by their vibrant existence but by their dramatic absences. The void left by a single vanished port forced merchants and empires to innovate, to redirect, to find another way. The loss of Muziris intensified the search for overland spice routes. The annihilation of Carthage cleared the seas for Roman monopoly. Each collapse created a vacuum that spurred the rise of new hubs, constantly redrawing the economic map of the world. As we look at our own deeply interconnected civilization, their ancient lessons about environmental sustainability, economic diversification, and societal resilience are more urgent than ever. The sea that gave these cities life ultimately claimed them, but their legacy endures in the currents of history and in the silent ruins that whisper their stories to those who listen. Thank you for joining this exploration of history's greatest maritime mysteries. If these tales of lost worlds have captivated you, subscribe for more journeys into the past and share your thoughts on which vanished city intrigues you most in the comments below.